Well, thank you very much, and good morning. It's really good to be here, and may I congratulate you if you're listening to the radio, to ABC Extra on DAB and through the ABC Radio app. Apologies for the visual jokes that may or may not come up. Apologies for at least one slide with 3 pie charts on the screen. Good luck following on from home with that, but thank you for tuning in to our ABC. I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, a title that's proof, if nothing else, of the fact that if you print your own business cards, you can call yourself anything. I'm a writer, a consultant sometimes, and a public speaker, and I go around the world spotting trends in radio's future and helping other people prepare for it. I'm now living in Brisbane, in Queensland, although, as you may be able to guess from my ever so slight accent, I am actually British. I've spent 27 years in radio, as you just heard, during which time I launched the first daily podcast for commercial radio in the UK. It's on The Guardian, it must be true, and the first streaming radio app in the world. I also changed the BBC's audio quality online from the worst to the best sounding of its many platforms. I have an eye on the future, and I think that podcasts are part of it. So this morning, I'd like to show you why. And I'm going to delve a little deeper into research about podcasting from the US, the UK, and here in Australia. I'll talk metrics, and I'll talk a little bit about success. But first, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about radio. Because today, thankfully, isn't a day when I have to talk about the future of radio. So I'll spare you this image from 1934, predicting that radio was going to become a fax machine, printing out a copy of today's newspapers, which is a little bit scary. Also, how big was this magazine if this was on page 590? I'll also gloss over radio's early attempt at the portable wireless set, the dream come true man from Mars radio hat, released in 1949, with a great review from Life magazine up at the top there. Works fine. I'll whisk quickly past this fresh-faced radio announcer on the air in 1993. What a guy. What a waistcoat. And I'll not be worrying what happened here 11 years ago as Wired promised the death of radio and had a special guide inside this magazine with Your Guide to Podcasting. There are 2 ways, I think, of thinking about radio, it seems to me. One way is to have a platformist view, to believe that radio is just AM, FM or DAB, that radio has to be live. There are too many people, I think, in radio with a transmitter mindset, that the transmitter must be fed 24 hours a day. Keeping the needle moving is the most important thing. And then there's another way, I think, of thinking about radio. And it starts with the content. So I have a definition of radio, which is a shared audio experience with a human connection. That's what I think radio is. So things like Spotify and Pandora aren't really radio. There's no shared experience. There's no human connection with Pandora or with Spotify. But with podcasts, absolutely there is. I've now lost count of the amount of people who talk to me about moments in podcasts just like moments on the radio. And it probably started with Serial. Even though Serial was 10 years after the start of podcasting. People at work were talking to me about Serial. They were asking which episode I was up to, wanting to share their own theories as to whether Adnan Syed was guilty or innocent. And indeed, thanks to the reporting of Serial and the reporting of the Undisclosed podcast, Adnan Syed is now officially innocent, accused but no longer convicted of Hae Min Lee's murder. It used to be that the media were the only people capable of effecting that kind of change. Greyhound racing, Bronwyn's helicopter. But podcasting has now come of age. And the reason why so many people here are affected by that story is that shared experience, that human connection. So as a radio person, I'm delighted that great radio, for that's what it is now on a new platform. that of podcasting. Not, of course, that radio's dying. It isn't. Broadly, radio is just as popular, if not more so, than it was 10 years ago. Now, time spent listening is down, as you would expect, but still, 9 out of 10 people still tune into the radio once a week. Whether you look at figures in the US or Canada, Malaysia, Norway, the UK, or here in Australia. And in recent months, there's been quite a discussion about metrics for podcasting. Are we in the dark? See what I did there? We don't know whether a download is actually heard. We understand very little about podcasting's audience. Surely, people say, the lack of metrics will kill the industry. Well, there are two ways, I think, to look at this. Yes, by comparison to a website or a streaming service, we do know less about our audience when it comes to podcasting. But by comparison to almost everything else, particularly newspaper readership or radio audience figures, the amount of data we have on podcasting is surprisingly detailed. And while companies like Omni Studio in Melbourne or Blueberry in the US claim to have more detailed stats these days, the data we all have is pretty good. So by all means, do push for better data. There's work going on in the US and the UK on this right now, though if Apple don't take much notice of it, it'll probably never happen. But podcasting probably doesn't actually have a metrics problem. It does have problems to solve, I think, and perhaps I'll get into those a little later. But what I'm going to do today is to get into some of the available research. Let me just preface this by saying, particularly to the statisticians in the audience, that it's probably not a great idea to compare stats from different countries, worked out in different ways, with different cultures and different media markets. But I'm going to do it anyway, and let's see what happens. So podcasting itself is still relatively small. This is a pie from the UK. This is a pie chart from the UK. And if you look at the share... I can't believe that got a groan. If you look at the share of ear, the stuff that we put into our ears every day, then live radio is still the leader by a long way, 75.8% for those listening at home. Podcasting accounts for only about 2% of the time spent listening to audio in the UK. And in the US, where streaming music is significantly larger, it's still actually the same. There's no Pandora in the UK, and the UK also has the BBC with their particularly popular music stations. But podcasting is growing. 6.9% of adults in the UK, and about double that in the US. The US figures is about 35 million people listen to at least one podcast every week. So I'm delighted to be able to share a lot of new research today. This number from ABC Your Space Research shows that there's a healthy increase in podcast consumption, 14% more consumption in the last 12 months. So how are we listening to podcasts? Well, of course, through mobile devices. Omni Studio has kindly shared some of their stats with me for this talk, and you can see that 83% of accesses to podcasts served by Omni Studio are done from a mobile device. Only 14% done on desktop. As ever, Australia leads the world on mobile, though the UK and the US also shows a majority of mobile use. So if you look at this, you'd think that podcasts are enjoyed while you're on the move, right? Well, you'd be right, but also you'd be wrong, because while the car is an important place for podcasts, the vast majority of podcasts are consumed at home. The ABC Your Space podcast survey at the bottom here tells a very similar story to the podcast consumer study by Edison Research in the US. Home first, then the car, and then work and public transport. Indeed, the only difference is that we appear to use public transport here in Australia, whereas in the US, I'm not sure they know what it is. Incidentally, I'd like a job, by the way, where I can listen to podcasts while working. How cool would that be? But the story doesn't end there, because there are increasingly new ways of getting podcasts to people. Whooshkaa revealed to me this week that 15% of their podcast plays are coming through embedded audio in Facebook posts. 15%, and a further 12% through embedded players within websites. But what kind of content are we sticking in our ears? Well, I started this by talking about radio. And my own research points to radio having a significant hold over podcasting. About a third of all podcasts in the iTunes Top 100, which isn't a chart and doesn't show the top 100 most popular podcasts, by the way, a third of all podcasts are originally radio shows here in Australia and in the UK. And in the US, a country with few national brands and a vibrant independent podcasting sector, 1 in 6 top podcasts come from radio in the US. And the US has a hold on us too. Now, you may have seen yesterday tweeted a list from the ABC with the most popular podcasts listened to by their audience, as measured through the ABC Your Space podcast survey. Let me share with you the top 3. Couldn't resist a chart. So here we are at number 3 with This American Life. A quarter of all survey respondents under 55 say that they listen to This American Life on podcast. I should say it's also a broadcast on RN Sundays at 7. TED Talks is at number 2. I find it really interesting that TED Talks, the audio version, is so popular here in Australia, with 27% of ABC survey respondents listening to TED Talks. And at number 1, would anybody like to guess what the number 1? Is everybody saying Conversations by Richard Fidler just because he's in the room? Well, guess what? Number 1 is Conversations. 37% of ABC survey respondents listen to Conversations. And why not? It's a great radio program, and it's the sort of radio program that you need to spend your time on as well. So when are people listening? Well, let me show you the scariest graph that I think you'll see today, certainly in my slide deck. It's a graph that looks like this. I've not even bothered redrawing this one because it's so scary. It's from the UK, and it's really interesting. What it shows is what people are doing, what people are using throughout a typical day. So let me help you with it. This line here is live radio. So you can see people tuning into, using live radio, particularly at breakfast, where there's a massive peak in the UK. You can also see a small peak just after 5 o'clock in the afternoon as people drive home through the rain to go home in the UK. Now, there is a morning commute, clearly, and an evening commute. But this is how people are using podcasting. Now, you can see that there is still a morning commute. It's nowhere near as big, but there is still a morning commute for podcasting. But it's afternoons that I find really interesting. You can see that actually, at sometimes, half as many people are listening to podcasts as they are listening to live radio. And I think this mirrors what radio programmers have been saying for a long time, that breakfast is a time for you to connect with the world, connect with other people, catch up on what the world has been doing overnight, and to find out what's been going on. While going home from work, you want a bit of time for yourself, a bit of time to reflect on the day. And I find that really interesting, that actually one of the peak times for podcasting is in the afternoon and then in the evening. So where are we using podcasts? Well, again, Omni Studio have given me this data showing where podcasts are downloaded. Now, initially, this comes as no big shock. Podcasts appear to be being downloaded where the people are in Australia. I know, amazing, isn't it? So places like New South Wales, places like Victoria, cold, miserable places that sadly aren't Queensland. But if you index this data against the Australian population, then something more interesting appears. First, wow, Victorians love podcasts, as do the boring people in the ACT. But secondly, there's a real opportunity in Queensland and WA here. If people there used podcasts as much as they do elsewhere, then that's some significant numbers that you can add to podcasting. And that's really what I'd like to highlight as podcasting's biggest challenge. Because in the US, a place which is leading the world in podcast consumption, a place which has so much money being poured into podcasts right now, only 55% of people are familiar with the term podcasting. So 45% of people, nearly half the US population, don't know what a podcast is. And this, I think, is podcasting's great opportunity. All of us in this room have a responsibility for education. Not just learning how to spell the word professional if you're running a professional writing group. We have a responsibility to help people understand what podcasts are, and a responsibility to make sure that you're producing content which is interesting to them. There are lots of podcasting coming out of this building. There's lots of podcasts that come out of New South Wales. Lots of them that come out of Melbourne. Not so much from everywhere else. And that is, I think, an opportunity for us. And it's our responsibility to help people discover that great content too, whether it's through excellent podcast apps like Adelaide's Pocket Casts, or websites, newsletters, or radio shows. Serial's website contained a video, which I would really recommend that you watch if you can, and some really plain English on how to get a podcast. And we should do this too. When you're talking to radio programmers, they always tell you to constantly reset, to remind people who you're interviewing, remind people what your name is. I'm James Cridland, and remind people about what the radio station is called. And we should use the same techniques when talking about podcasting, when talking about apps, when talking about digital radio. This stuff isn't familiar to most people. It's familiar to us because that's what we live, that's what we breathe. But it's not familiar to most people who are consuming this stuff. So we need to constantly remind people how it works. The good news, of course, is that podcasting, on-demand radio, doesn't need much bandwidth, nor does it require the latest iPhone. So any data connection, NBN or not, makes podcasts available. So where people are is actually relatively immaterial. It's that people understand what podcasting is. That's the sound of success to me in terms of podcasting. And I think reading Michael Mason's succinct plan for the future of ABC Radio this week, it would seem that podcasting has a very special part to play in the ABC's future. For many, it's their first taste of well-produced speech radio and their first taste of documentaries and in-depth news reporting. It's a key public purpose for a public broadcaster. So what of the future? Well, I think the podcast is just one new platform for great radio, and there are already other new ways of making great audio content available to audiences. NPR One is a really great and fascinating app, and you should all play with it if you haven't done so already. It takes individual news stories from across NPR's programming and puts them together in a personalised experience. More of the news stories you want, less of the stories you don't. For music radio, My Capital Extra is a UK radio station which is letting you skip the songs you don't like on the app. You still hear the radio announcers, you still hear everything you expect from radio, including the same type of music. You can just avoid the songs that you don't want to hear. And iHeartRadio is producing something new in the US for now called iHeartRadio Plus, which as far as I can work out will do the same sort of thing, a radio experience that can be personalized. And the real key to personalization is time. All these services are disaggregating long-form content to make a skippable, personalizable future for audio. Gone are the 1 hour long shows. Audiences are now consuming short 5-10 minute pieces with metadata and other content to make a great sounding personalized audio stream. So perhaps I might make a plea to some podcasters here today to think really carefully about the length of your podcasts. I'm not sure that a 40-minute long podcast is necessarily where we're headed. And by the way, I'm not sure that a 1 hour, 10-minute podcast is really respecting your audience's time. You might consider how you might atomize that content, to break it up into a set of smaller pieces, to allow a better user experience by Lego bricking those together in different ways. Can I have your show, but without that sports story in the middle, please? Can I skip past a story I'm not interested in? Finally, if you were to ask me what the future is for radio or for podcasting, I think it's related to these three things. If I was a really good consultant, I'd have made a name for this triangle. The Cridland Triangle of the Future, I don't know. But anyway, there are three things here. Firstly, technology. Is an RSS feed the right and only way to deliver audio? Or is it just one of a series of ways that we can get our on-demand audio to our audience? Do we put podcasts into Facebook? Are podcasts front and center in our own apps as well? If most podcasts are enjoyed at home, as the data suggests, then let's make sure that podcasts get into the technology that we use at home. Things like iView, Telstra TV, your smart television, Presto, all of those sorts of things. User experience. How easy is it to find your podcast? How easy is it to play your podcast? How can we make it even easier? How can we educate our audiences as to what a podcast is? And how can we raise the amount of people who understand podcasting? Can we make podcasting as natural as turning on the radio? That's a real hurdle, I think, of where we currently are. And last, but most certainly not least, is content. Podcasting has some great content and some not so great content. So how can we make the right content for audiences to enjoy? And does a podcast need to be made differently than a radio program because it's being consumed in a different way? I think if we get these three things right, then success looks like our audience is smiling, and our advertisers, if we have them, smiling too, and that should mean that everybody in this room will smile. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks.